My name is Yvonne. I am 62 years old, and my occupation is a retired registered nurse. I live in a beautiful, fully paid-off home in an upscale suburb of Atlanta. I built this sanctuary from the ground up, pouring my soul into every square foot of it. I am a strong, proud black woman who knows the true meaning of grit and hard work. When my husband passed away entirely too early, my world stopped, but I did not have the luxury of falling apart. I did what a mother has to do. I worked grueling double shifts, exhausting nights, and every major holiday just to ensure my only son, Jamal, graduated college debt-free and had a solid start in life. Every brick of this house, every polished hardwood floor holds the memory of my aching feet and my endless prayers for his future. I gave him everything willingly, sacrificing my own youth so he could thrive and become a good man. I thought my devotion had secured a family bond that nothing could break. But sometimes the very people you bleed for are the ones holding the knife. She strutted around my living room, treating my lifelong home like her own personal prize. My daughter-in-law was so confident that marrying my boy meant taking my property, but her smug smile would soon vanish when I revealed the true legal owner. It all started on what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday afternoon. I had spent hours in the kitchen preparing a beautiful pot roast, the kind of meal meant to bring a family together. Jamal and his 28-year-old wife, Chloe, were sitting across from me at the mahogany dining table I bought with my very first nursing bonus. We were just finishing up the meal when Chloe abruptly reached into her expensive designer bag. She pulled out a glossy tri-fold brochure and casually tossed it right onto my dinner plate. It landed with a soft thud, splashing a drop of gravy right onto the brightly colored cover. I looked down, trying to make sense of the image. It was a pamphlet for a low-income state-run assisted living facility located on the other side of the county. Before I could even process the disrespect of what I was looking at, Chloe smoothly leaned back in her chair. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine and looked me dead in the eye with a chilling, entitled smirk. "Jamal and I have decided this house is just too much for you to handle, Yvonne," she announced, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary sweetness I had quickly come to despise. "We will be taking over the master suite by the end of the month, so you really need to start packing your things." The air in my dining room instantly turned to ice. My chest tightened so hard I could barely draw a breath. I did not yell. I did not throw the brochure back in her face. Instead, I slowly turned my gaze to Jamal, the son I had given my last dime to raise. I waited for him to speak up. I waited for the boy who used to hold my hand and tell me I was his hero to defend his mother. I expected him to tell his wife she had completely lost her mind. But Jamal did not say a single word. He just stared down at his plate cowardly, refusing to meet my eyes silently, allowing a stranger to kick me out of the home I built for us. That silence was the ultimate betrayal. It was a knife twisting right into my soul. They thought I would just fold, cry, and fade away into the shadows. They thought a mother's love meant unconditional surrender. To understand the sheer audacity of that moment, you have to understand what it took for me to build this life. When my husband David passed away, Jamal was just 7 years old. Suddenly, I was a single mother, trying to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I worked as a registered nurse at the county hospital. I took every overnight shift, every holiday rotation, every overtime hour they offered. While other mothers were taking their children on summer vacations to Orlando or cruises to the Bahamas, I was pacing the cold linoleum floors of the intensive care unit. My feet throbbed, my back ached, and I prayed constantly for the strength to get through just one more hour. Every paycheck, every bonus, every penny I managed to scrape together went straight into two things: Jamal's college fund and this house. I remember those brutal 12-hour shifts, where I would come home just as the sun was coming up. I would kick off my white nursing shoes by the front door, rub my swollen ankles, and walk through the quiet halls of this home. I would trace my fingers along the custom crown molding I saved up for 3 years to install. I would look at the hardwood floors I polished on my hands and knees. This house holds the echoes of David's deep laughter. It holds the pencil marks on the pantry doorframe, where I measured Jamal, growing taller every single year. Every room in this house is a chapter of my life, a testament to a black woman who refused to be broken by grief or poverty. I built a legacy with my own 2 hands. I sacrificed my own desires for decades. I wore the same winter coat for 10 years. I drove a beat-up sedan that rattled every time I hit the brakes. I did it all with a smile on my face because I knew my boy was going to graduate from a good university without a single dime of debt weighing him down. And he did. He graduated with honors, stepped right into a great corporate job, and made me the proudest mother in Atlanta. I thought my job was done. I finally owned my beautiful 4-bedroom home, free and clear. I thought Jamal understood the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this soil. I thought he respected the ground he walked on. I thought I had earned my peace. Then came Chloe. Jamal met her at a networking event downtown. At first, she seemed like a lovely girl. She had a bright smile, said all the right things, and brought me expensive candles whenever she came over for dinner. But looking back, the warning signs were always there, waving right in my face. Chloe had a certain air of entitlement, a subtle way of turning her nose up at anything she deemed beneath her. She expected the best of everything, even if she did not have the money to pay for it. When they got engaged, Chloe insisted on a lavish, over-the-top wedding at an exclusive country club. She wanted the imported flowers, the designer dress, the massive ice sculptures. Jamal, desperate to give his bride the world, drained his savings and maxed out his credit cards to give her that picture-perfect day. 6 months after the honeymoon, reality hit them hard. The lease on their luxury downtown apartment was up, and they were drowning in debt. Jamal came to me looking exhausted and ashamed. He asked if they could stay with me for just a year, so they could save up for a down payment on their own place. Naturally, my motherly instincts kicked in. I had 4 bedrooms, plenty of space, and I wanted to help my son get back on his feet. I graciously opened my doors to them. I cleared out my sewing room to give Chloe a home office. I gave them the entire 2nd floor so they could have their privacy. I did it because I trusted my boy completely. I believed that providing a safety net for my child was what a good mother was supposed to do. I never once asked them for a dime in rent. I bought all the groceries, cooked the meals, and paid all the utilities so they could focus entirely on saving their money. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted to see them build their own sanctuary, just like David and I did. But my absolute trust in Jamal blinded me to the creeping danger right under my own roof. I should have noticed the way her eyes darted around my formal dining room, assessing the value of my antique china cabinet. I should have paid attention when she casually asked about the property taxes in my neighborhood and how much homes on my street were selling for. But I brushed it off as innocent curiosity. My love for Jamal created a blind spot the size of Georgia. I assumed that because I raised an honest, hard-working man, the woman he chose to marry would share those same values. I assumed that gratitude would be her natural response to living rent-free in a $500,000 home. How dangerously wrong I was. I was so busy being a supportive mother that I failed to realize I had invited a parasite into my home. Chloe did not see my generosity as a blessing. She saw my beautiful paid-off house as an opportunity. She saw an aging widow living alone in a highly sought-after neighborhood, and she began to lay the groundwork to take it all away from me. I thought I was offering a temporary safe haven. I did not know I had welcomed a Trojan horse. The disrespect did not start with that single brochure on my dinner plate. It had been creeping into my sanctuary for months, like a slow and silent poison. Chloe began treating me less like the matriarch of the family and more like a hired maid in my own home. I would spend all morning slow cooking collard greens and smothered chicken. The recipes my grandmother taught me back in the day, only for Chloe to walk into the kitchen, wrinkle her nose, and loudly complain that the smell of soul food was ruining the ambiance of the house. She would casually dump my carefully prepared meals into the garbage disposal and order expensive sushi delivery using Jamal's credit card. When I played my classic R&B records on Sunday mornings, a tradition Jamal grew up with, she would march into the living room and switch the audio system to some soulless instrumental noise, claiming my music gave her a headache. I watched her rearrange my furniture, hide my family photographs in the hallway closet, and act as though my presence was a temporary inconvenience she was forced to tolerate. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. I did it because I saw how exhausted my son looked every day after work, and I refused to be the reason he came home to a war zone. I wanted to keep the peace for Jamal. Then came her older brother, Chad. Chad was a slick, fast-talking commercial real estate agent who drove a flashy, imported sports car he could barely afford. He started dropping by my house unannounced several times a week. He would walk through my front door without knocking, bypass me in the living room without so much as a greeting, and head straight for my custom-built wine cellar. David and I had spent years collecting vintage wines for special occasions. Chad would pull out $100 bottles, pop the corks, and pour himself generous glasses as if he were relaxing in a hotel lobby. But the theft of my wine was nothing compared to the blatant disrespect that poured from his mouth. Chad would stand in the middle of my foyer swirling his stolen wine and make these thinly veiled, condescending comments that made my blood boil. He would look around at the vaulted ceilings and the imported chandelier and say things with a smug smirk on his face. It is absolutely fascinating that a neighborhood this exclusive let a woman with your specific background buy property here back in the day. You must have had some incredible luck, Yvonne. He never said the silent part out loud, but I knew exactly what he meant. He could not fathom how a hard-working black woman had managed to acquire and pay off a prime piece of real estate in one of the most coveted zip codes in Atlanta without some sort of handout. I would watch him pace the length of my living room, pulling a digital laser measuring tape from his tailored suit jacket. He would measure my square footage tap on my solid oak walls to check the studs and inspect my crown molding. He would talk to Chloe in loud whispers right in front of me. If we knock down this load-bearing wall and open up the kitchen, the resale value on this lot will skyrocket, he would tell her. We can completely modernize this outdated layout. They spoke about my home as if I were already dead and buried. Every maternal instinct in my body screamed at me to throw them both out onto the street. But I looked at Jamal. My boy looked so beaten down by his own life that I swallowed my pride. I told myself that they were just dreaming out loud, that they were young and foolish, and that Jamal would never allow them to actually touch my home. That foolish illusion was shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had a routine appointment with my cardiologist and was supposed to be gone for several hours. But the clinic was running ahead of schedule, and I found myself pulling into my driveway nearly 2 hours early. I noticed Chad's flashy sports car parked illegally across my pristine lawn. Instead of coming through the front door, I quietly walked around the side of the house and slipped through the utility entrance near the kitchen. The house was dead silent, except for the hushed, intense voices coming from the island counter. I stopped in the shadow of the pantry door, holding my breath. Chad was pacing the kitchen floor, slapping a thick stack of legal documents against the marble countertop. "Listen to me, Chloe," he was saying, his voice sharp and greedy. "This market is shifting right now. This property is sitting on a gold mine of equity, and she is just hoarding it. If we play this right, we walk away with 7 figures. I heard Chloe sigh, sounding slightly annoyed, but completely engaged. I know Chad, but she is stubborn. She is not just going to hand over the deed to the house. She thinks this place is her sacred legacy, or whatever. That is why we use the legal loophole, Chad replied, lowering his voice just a fraction, though I could hear every malicious word. You told her she needs to update her life insurance policies, right? We slip this durable power of attorney into the middle of that insurance stack. She trusts Jamal too much to actually read the fine print. Once she signs the power of attorney, I have a buddy at the title office who can fast-track the deed transfer right into our holding company. Chloe let out a soft gasp. But what about when she realizes she does not own the house anymore? What if she calls the police or hires a lawyer? Chad let out a cruel, barking laugh. That is the beauty of the plan, little sister. Once we have the legal rights to the property, we call in a favor from Dr. Evans. We declare her mentally unfit. We say she is suffering from severe dementia and is a danger to herself. We use the proceeds from the cash-out refinance to dump her in that cheap state-run facility you found. By the time anyone questions it, the house will be flipped, the money will be offshore, and the old lady will be locked in a memory care ward, pumped full of sedatives. I leaned heavily against the cold pantry wall. The air in my lungs felt like broken glass. I waited for Chloe to express horror. I waited for my daughter-in-law to say that this was going too far, that they could not destroy an innocent woman's life just for a real estate flip. Instead, a light, wicked giggle floated through the kitchen. Chloe was actually laughing. It is brilliant, she said, her voice dripping with greed. But what if Jamal tries to fight us on it? He still has this pathetic attachment to his mummy. Chad scoffed loudly. Jamal is a spineless coward. You have that man so twisted around your finger he does not even know which way is up. When we tell him his mother is losing her mind and needs professional care, he will just cry and agree. He is too weak to stop us. Every drop of grief, every ounce of sorrow I had ever felt in my life evaporated in that single instant. The betrayal was so absolute, so profoundly evil, that it burned away my heartbreak and left behind a cold, calculated anger. I realized in that dark pantry that my life's work, my freedom and my very sanity were being stolen by opportunistic leeches. They wanted to strip me of my wealth, lock me in a cage and drug me into a stupor so they could buy luxury cars and designer clothes. I did not storm into the kitchen. I did not scream or throw plates. My years as an emergency room nurse had taught me how to stay perfectly calm while a patient was bleeding out on the table. I quietly stepped backward, slipped back out the utility door and walked to the end of the block, to the end of Shelfts. I sat on a public bench for 20 minutes, organizing my mind and locking my fury inside a steel vault in my chest. When I finally walked through the front door, jangling my keys loudly to announce my presence, I played the part of the tired, oblivious mother perfectly. But the clock was ticking, and the tension in my home began to escalate to a suffocating boiling point. Chloe and Jamal started watching me like vultures circling a dying animal. They would monitor my phone calls, casually ask me if I was forgetting things, and try to confuse me about conversations we had already had. They were laying the psychological groundwork to convince Jamal that my mind was failing. The final push came 3 nights later. I was sitting in the living room, quietly sipping a cup of chamomile tea, when Chloe and Jamal marched into the room. Jamal looked deeply uncomfortable, staring at the floor, with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Chloe, however, looked like a predator closing in for the kill. She was clutching a thick, heavy stack of legal documents inside a pristine manila folder. She slapped the folder down onto the coffee table, right in front of my teacup. "Yvonne, we need to handle this right now," Chloe demanded, her voice aggressive and commanding. "We have been talking about updating your life insurance policies for weeks. You are getting older, and Jamal needs to know he is financially protected if anything sudden happens to you." I have all the paperwork right here. I have even highlighted where you need to sign. She shoved a fancy silver pen toward my face. I slowly picked up the stack of papers. My eyes immediately caught the bold legal jargon near the top of the second page. Durable power of attorney, transfer of real property, quitclaim deed. They were not even trying to hide it well. I looked up at Chloe, intentionally letting my hands tremble just a little. I made my eyes wide and fearful. Chloe? This looks very complicated, I said, making my voice sound fragile and confused. I thought we were just talking about standard insurance. Why does this page say something about property transfers? Chloe let out a sharp, exasperated sigh, dropping her fake sweetness completely. Listen to me, Yvonne. Do not make this harder than it has to be. It is just standard legal phrasing to protect the estate. You need to sign these documents tonight. She leaned over the coffee table, invading my personal space, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. Sign this right now, or we will have to go to court and formally prove that you are losing your mind and becoming a danger to society. We will have a judge force you into a care facility. You really would not want to embarrass Jamal by dragging this family through a messy public mental competency hearing, would you? I looked at my son, my beautiful boy, the child I had sacrificed my entire youth to protect. Jamal. I whispered, my voice breaking with genuine pain. Are you really going to let her speak to me this way? Are you going to let her do this to your mother? Jamal flinched. He looked like he wanted to sink into the floorboards. He squeezed his eyes shut, turned his face away from me, and muttered a pathetic, weak response. Just sign the papers, Mum. It is for the best. Chloe knows what she is doing. Please do not make a scene. That was it. That was the exact moment the last string of maternal grace snapped inside me. But I knew better than to fight a battle I had not fully armed myself for. I looked back down at the papers, pulled my shawl tightly around my shoulders, and played the part of the defeated, terrified older woman. I pushed the folder back across the table with a shaky hand. I cannot read all of this without my reading glasses, I murmured, keeping my head bowed in fake submission. My head hurts, and I'm very tired. Give me the weekend to rest my eyes and look over the fine print. I promise I will sign whatever you need on Monday night. Let us just have a nice family dinner, and we can handle the paperwork then. Chloe snatched the folder off the table with a triumphant smirk, convinced she had thoroughly broken my spirit. Fine, she snapped. Monday night. But no more excuses, Yvonne. You're out of time. She turned on her heel and strutted out of the room, dragging my cowardly son behind her. I sat alone in the dim light of my living room, listening to their footsteps retreat up the stairs. I was not defeated. I was not scared. I asked for the weekend because I needed exactly 3 days to finalize my own plans. I picked up my teacup, my hands completely steady now, and took a slow, deliberate sip. They wanted to steal my legacy. They wanted to test the strength of a mother pushed to the absolute edge. They were about to learn a devastating lesson about what happens then when you corner a woman who has nothing left to lose. When the sun came up the next morning, my pillow was completely dry. I did not shed a single tear for the son I was losing. My years as a registered nurse taught me one very important lesson. Crying does not stop the bleeding. Only swift, decisive action can save your life. I would ensure they faced the devastating consequences of underestimating a mother's resolve. As soon as Jamal and Chloe left the house for work, I grabbed my purse and drove straight to a specialized electronics store across town. I purchased 4 high-definition, motion-activated hidden cameras. They were designed to look exactly like standard phone chargers and plug in air fresheners. I strategically placed them in the kitchen, the formal dining room, the living room, and the main hallway where they did most of their scheming. It did not take long to capture exactly what I needed. By Wednesday evening, I sat in my locked bedroom with my headphones on, watching the footage on my tablet. The audio was crystal clear. I watched Chad strut into my kitchen, open my refrigerator, and casually hand Chloe a bottle of my expensive sparkling water. I listened as he laughed and leaning against my granite countertops, telling his sister that it was practically a crime for a woman of my complexion to be hoarding such a prime piece of real estate in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. He actually used those words. He told her that people like me did not know how to manage generational wealth anyway, so they were really doing society a huge favor by taking the property off my hands. Hearing that blatant, racist entitlement dripping from his mouth completely eradicated whatever lingering guilt I had about what I was about to do. Jamal was choosing these parasites over the mother who gave him life. He was allowing them to mock our heritage and steal our legacy. Early Thursday morning, I walked into the downtown law offices of Mr. Harrison. He is a brilliant attorney who has handled my family's legal affairs for over 20 years. He is a shrewd, no-nonsense man who knew my late husband well. I sat across from his heavy oak desk and played the video clips. I watched his jaw tighten with profound disgust with every arrogant word Chad and Chloe spoke. Then I showed him the fraudulent paperwork they had tried to force me to sign. Mr. Harrison immediately began typing on his computer, running a deep background check on Chad's real estate credentials. What he found made my blood run even colder. Chad had already pulled a preliminary title search on my property. He was mapping out the property lines and evaluating the equity. He was preparing the ground to flip my home, the absolute second the ink dried on that fraudulent power of attorney. He was moving fast, which meant we had to move even faster. I looked Mr. Harrison in the eye and told him I needed this house protected in a way that not even a team of highly paid corporate lawyers could penetrate. He leaned back in his leather chair, a sharp, calculating glint in his eye, and outlined a brilliant legal maneuver. We were going to establish an irrevocable blind trust. Once the trust was created, I would legally transfer the deed of my house directly into it. By transferring the property, I would effectively remove my name from the ownership documents completely. I would no longer be the legal owner of the house on paper. The trust would hold the property, making it a separate legal entity. An irrevocable trust cannot be dissolved, altered, or touched by any outside party. It cannot be accessed by someone holding a forged power of attorney. They could force me to sign 100 documents, they could drag me in front of a judge, and it would not matter. You simply cannot steal a house from a woman who technically does not own it. I signed the heavy stack of transfer documents that very afternoon. As Mr. Harrison stamped the final seal, a profound sense of armor wrapped around me. My sanctuary was officially bulletproof. Now that my property was completely insulated by the law, I had to play my part to perfection. I returned home that evening and initiated the greatest acting performance of my entire life. To successfully trap a predator, you must firmly convince them that their prey is weak and unaware. Over the next few days, I began to feign a rapid cognitive decline. I deliberately misplaced my car keys, leaving them inside the crisper drawer of the refrigerator where Chloe would easily find them. During our quiet dinners, I would intentionally ask Jamal the exact same question 3 times in a row, pretending to lose my train of thought. I would sit in my armchair and stare blankly at the muted television, portraying the image of a frail, declining older woman who could no longer manage her own life. Chloe and Jamal swallowed the bait whole. The hidden cameras captured Chloe practically vibrating with gleeful excitement. I heard her telling Jamal that my mind was deteriorating much faster than anticipated. She forcefully reminded him that they were making the most responsible decision by taking over my estate before I accidentally burned the house down. Jamal just nodded his head, looking somber but entirely convinced his mother was tragically losing her grip on reality. The immense false confidence I gave them made them incredibly sloppy and eager to finish the job. On Sunday evening, I walked into the living room where they were lounging on the sofa. I wrapped my thick knitted shawl tightly around my shoulders, intentionally hunched my back to appear much smaller, and kept my hands trembling slightly. I approached them with a soft, defeated sigh. I told them that I had spent the weekend thinking deeply about our previous conversation, and I realized they were absolutely right. I told them the enormous house was simply becoming too much for me to safely manage, that I could feel my memory slipping away, and that I was feeling completely overwhelmed. I then looked directly at Chloe and spoke the words she had been desperately waiting to hear. I told her I was fully ready to sign the insurance papers and formally surrender the legal management of the house to them. Chloe's eyes immediately lit up with a predatory flash. She quickly masked her excitement with a fake, exaggerated, sympathetic pout. She stood up, placed a condescending hand on my shoulder, and told me I was making a brave choice. But I told them I had one final condition. I explained that handing over the beloved home my late husband and I built was a massive emotional milestone. I requested that we host a beautiful celebratory family dinner on Tuesday night to mark the occasion and formally pass the torch. I wanted to cook one last grand meal in my kitchen dress-up in our Sunday best and sign the legal documents together at the table. I said it would bring my weary heart peace to handle the transition with dignity. Chloe's blinding greed completely overpowered any lingering suspicion she might have harbored. She agreed immediately, her voice bubbling with artificial joy. She even offered a suggestion that played perfectly into the trap I had set. She said that to ensure the paperwork was handled smoothly, she would invite her brother Chad to the dinner. She casually mentioned that Chad had a good friend who was a licensed notary public. He could come over, enjoy the dinner, and legally notarize my signature right there at the dining room table. I smiled a weak, grateful smile and thanked her for being so thoughtful. I turned away, watching them exchange a triumphant look in the reflection of the hallway mirror. They were convinced they had successfully manipulated a helpless widow into handing over a multi-million-dollar asset. As I walked back to my bedroom, letting my hunched posture straighten proudly with every step, a cold smile spread across my face. They were bringing the corrupt real estate agent and the fraudulent notary right into my dining room, completely unaware they were stepping onto a stage I had meticulously designed. I spent Monday preparing the most exquisite feast, marinating the meats, and setting the table with my finest crystal. I polished every piece of silverware until it gleamed perfectly under the warm dining room lights. I was not preparing a meal for a surrender. I was preparing a glorious feast for an execution. Tuesday evening arrived with a heavy stillness that settled over my dining room. I had prepared a feast fit for a king. There was roasted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, and honey-glazed carrots resting on the very table my late husband and I had picked out together. The crystal chandelier overhead cast a warm golden glow across the room, illuminating the sheer audacity of the people sitting around me. Chloe sat to my right, practically vibrating with a smug, victorious energy. She kept swirling her red wine, her eyes darting around the room as if she were mentally redecorating every single corner. Across from her sat her brother Chad, wearing an expensive tailored suit and a grin that made my stomach turn. He had brought along a sweaty, nervous-looking man he briefly introduced as a notary public. And then there was Jamal. My only son sat directly across from me. His shoulders slumped, staring intently at his plate of untouched food. He refused to look me in the eye. The sound of silverware clinking against the fine china felt deafening. Nobody was really eating. We were all just playing a part in this sickening theatrical production. Chloe cleared her throat loudly, placing her wine glass down with a sharp clink. Well, she said, her voice dripping with that artificial, sugary sweetness she used to mask her poison. This has been a lovely dinner, Yvonne, but we really should get down to business. We want to make sure everything is properly settled so you can start packing for your new community without any unnecessary stress." Chad did not even wait for me to respond. He eagerly reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out that thick stack of fraudulent legal documents. He slid them across the polished mahogany wood, stopping them right in front of my plate. He smoothed the top page with his pale hand, leaning forward with an arrogance that belonged to a man who thought he had already won. He tapped the signature line twice. "We made this as simple as possible for you, Yvonne," Chad said, speaking to me slowly and loudly, exactly the way one might speak to a confused toddler. "All you need to do is sign your name right here on the dotted line. Do not worry your tired head about reading all that complicated legal jargon. Chloe and Jamal are going to take excellent care of your estate. It is time for you to rest. It is for the best." He held out a heavy silver pen, suspending it in the air between us. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with undisguised greed, waiting for me to take it. Jamal finally looked up, his face pale and twisted with guilt. But he remained utterly silent. He was genuinely going to let them steal my life right in front of him. I looked at the silver pen. I looked at the fraudulent documents. And then I slowly folded my napkin and placed it neatly next to my plate. I took a deep, steadying breath. I did not take the pen. Instead, I sat up perfectly straight, letting my spine align with the unyielding strength of every black woman who came before me. The fragile, confused old lady persona melted away instantly, replaced by a fierce, icy authority that froze the air in the room. I reached down beside my chair and pulled out my own sleek black leather folder, dropping it onto the table with a resounding thud. "I am afraid there is a slight problem with your paperwork, Chad," I said, my voice steady, resonant, and completely devoid of fear. I looked directly into Chloe's shocked eyes and delivered the words I had been waiting all weekend to say. "I cannot sign over the house to you, Chloe, because I do not own it anymore." The silence that crashed down on the dining room was absolute. Chloe's smug smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. Chad let out a nervous scoff, shaking his head, as if I had just told a bad joke. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice pitching higher. "We ran the title search just last week. You are the sole owner of this property." "Not as of yesterday morning," I replied smoothly. I opened my black folder and slid a single, officially stamped document across the table. I legally transferred the deed of this entire property into an irrevocable, heavily fortified blind trust. I am no longer the legal owner on paper. The trust is. And an irrevocable trust cannot be transferred, sold, or altered by anyone holding a fraudulent power of attorney. This house is completely and entirely untouchable. Chad snatched the paper from the table, his eyes darting frantically across the legal text. His face drained of all color as the reality of my words set in. Chloe jumped up from her chair, her voice shrill and trembling. "You are lying. You are losing your mind. Jamal, tell your mother to stop talking nonsense and sign the papers." But Jamal was staring at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and sudden realization. Before anyone else could speak, I reached into my folder and pulled out my tablet. "I am not losing my mind, Chloe," I said coldly, "but I am highly observant." I tapped the screen and turned the volume all the way up. The crystal-clear video from my hidden kitchen camera began to play. Chad's arrogant, racist voice echoed loudly through the dining room, detailing exactly how they planned to declare me mentally unfit, steal my home, and dump me in a facility. The video played the exact moment Chloe laughed at the idea of drugging me into a stupor, mocking Jamal for being too weak to stop them. Jamal gasped, his chair scraping violently against the floor as he stood up. He looked at his wife in pure horror, finally seeing the monster he had brought into my home. Chloe opened and closed her mouth, sputtering uselessly, completely unable to deny the high-definition evidence playing right in front of her. Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of my dining room swung open. My brilliant attorney, Mr. Harrison, stepped out from the hallway, flanked by two uniformed Atlanta police officers. The nervous notary took one look at the police, dropped his briefcase, and literally sprinted out the back door into the night. Chad tried to follow him, but one of the officers stepped directly into his path, blocking the exit. "Mr. Chad?" Mr. Harrison said, his voice ringing with professional satisfaction. "We have already forwarded that video footage, along with these forged documents, to the State Real Estate Commission and the District Attorney. Your license is currently being flagged for severe elder abuse and real estate fraud. I suggest you call a very good defense attorney." Chad looked like he was about to pass out. The officers escorted him out of my home, reading him his rights as he stammered pathetic excuses. Chloe stood, frozen tears of defeat streaming down her perfectly contoured face. Jamal was weeping openly, apologizing over and over, begging for my forgiveness. I stood up from the head of my table, holding two crisp, officially stamped papers. I walked over to the son I had sacrificed my youth for, and the woman who had tried to destroy me. I handed them each a document. "These are 24-hour legal eviction notices," I said, my voice echoing with finality. "You wanted me out of my house. No, you are getting out of mine. You have until tomorrow night to pack your bags and leave my property forever." The silence in my home the next evening was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Without a single dime of my money to fall back on, Jamal and Chloe had no choice but to pack their designer bags and move into a tiny, cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the walls are paper thin, and Chloe complains every single day. As for her arrogant brother Chad, his real estate license was permanently revoked. He is currently facing serious criminal charges for fraud and attempted elder abuse, spending all his stolen money on defense attorneys trying to keep him out of federal prison. I finally reclaimed my sanctuary. I completely redecorated the second floor, turning Chloe's so-called home office into a beautiful art studio just for myself. Next month, I am finally taking that Caribbean cruise I postponed for decades. I will be sipping something sweet on a balcony overlooking the ocean, celebrating my hard-won freedom. I learned the hardest way possible that true family is about mutual respect, not just shared blood. If they do not truly respect you, they surely do not deserve you. I want every single beautiful woman listening to hear me loud and clear. Never mistake a mother's kindness for weakness. Protect your peace and protect your hard-earned assets. If you were in my shoes, would you have kicked your own son out to save yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and please tell me exactly where you are watching from today and what time it is right now. Stay strong, queens. Stand your ground. I will see you all in the very next story.